Late on a Friday night, alone in my workshop, I got a text from my son. Don't come to Leo's celebration. The guests are all business contacts. You'd make things uncomfortable. No apology. Just that. I called back. He didn't answer. I left a voicemail with 3 words. I understand. Goodbye. Then I went back to the wood and worked until morning. 2 days later, my phone rang. Julian's voice was completely unraveled. They'd just seen the magazine. Welcome to Alpha Dad Revenge. My name is Arthur Miller. I'm 68. I live in a small house in Millbrook, Virginia, with a workshop out back where I've spent most of my life shaping white oak and pine. For 27 years before that, I was chief inspector for the Commonwealth of Virginia. I approved or shut down billions in infrastructure. I never took a dime, never bent a rule. Most people never knew. I liked it that way. My son Julian didn't. 6 weeks before Leo was born, Julian called to say Cassandra had gone into labor. I drove 2 hours to the hospital, sat in the hallway for 4 more, and when Julian finally came out, he shook my hand like I was a colleague. We're calling him Leo, he said. Then he told me to come back next week. I went home and started building the cradle. White oak frame, doesn't warp. Pine panels, holds warmth. Hand-cut dovetails because they last. Steam-bent rockers that took 3 tries. 4 coats of oil, hand-buffed. I poured 6 weeks of early mornings into that piece. Not because Julian asked, he never did. Because my grandson deserved something built by hands that loved him. Dot, my neighbor, saw it finished at dawn. When are you taking it over? She asked. This morning. She didn't say what she was thinking. She didn't have to. I drove to their house in Westfield Hills. Julian answered the door in a collared shirt at 9 a.m. on a Saturday. When he saw the cradle, his face did that careful calculation I've watched since he was a teenager. It's beautiful, Dad, really. But Cassandra's parents already set up the nursery. Italian crib. It wouldn't fit the aesthetic. The aesthetic. They put it in the basement. 2 weeks later I drove back, just to see Leo. Julian met me at the door, voice low. Not a good time, Dad. We have company. Through the doorway I saw Richard Sterling, Cassandra's father, sitting in the leather armchair like he owned the air in the room. And my son, my 38-year-old son, was on his knees shining the man's shoes. I left without a fight. Some silences aren't defeat, they're economy. Then came the text. I sat in the workshop that Friday night, phone in my hand, and felt something settle. Not rage, just clarity. I called, left the voicemail, and went back to work. The next morning, my old friend Thomas Briggs came over with muffins and his briefcase. I told him everything. By 10:45 we'd drawn up a revocable living trust. Leo as sole beneficiary, Thomas as trustee. Julian would never touch a cent of the $212,000 I'd saved over 30 years. He didn't even know it existed. I signed. Thomas witnessed. Done. That same afternoon the mail arrived. A magazine I hadn't ordered. Architecture and Planning. My face on the cover. 20 years younger, shaking hands with the governor at the signing of the biggest infrastructure project in Virginia history. The headline called me Integrity's Architect. The article laid out my entire record. No project I approved ever failed code. No favors, no exceptions. I set it down on the workbench and sat there a long time. Dot came by. She read it. Looked at me over her glasses. Does Julian know? No. The calls started an hour later. Unknown Richmond number. Then Julian. Then more. I let them ring. By Sunday, Dot had the story from her nephew. Richard Sterling had seen the magazine in a waiting room. Read it. Realized the retired woodworker his son-in-law had been mocking for 2 years was the man whose former colleagues now held the fate of his $47 million downtown expansion project in their hands. He'd struck Julian across the face in the conference room. Hard enough to make a point, not hard enough to show. Robert Haynes, Richard's assistant, showed up at my workshop the next day. Polite. Careful. Said Richard wanted to talk. I told him I'd think about it. Julian showed up right after Robert left. He dropped to both knees on the concrete floor of my workshop. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. He told me about the shame he'd felt, about how he'd let Richard believe I was nothing, about how the project was frozen and they were drowning. I listened. Then I said the only thing that mattered. I'll come to the party, but I'm coming for Leo, not for Richard. Not for you. Saturday night at the Sterling estate. I wore the same gray suit from the 2004 photograph. I carried the cradle up the gravel path wrapped in a moving blanket. Richard met me at the door. Firm handshake, controlled smile. "Mr. Miller, glad you came." Inside, the party was exactly what you'd expect. Flowers arranged by professionals, string quartet, power players nursing drinks. I stayed near the edges. Watched. Thomas was there. We exchanged the smallest nod. When the gift presentation started, I carried the cradle to the front. I didn't use the microphone. Didn't need to. "My name is Arthur Miller. I'm Leo's grandfather." I set the cradle down and pulled the blanket away. The white oak glowed under the chandeliers. "I made this for my grandson. Hand-cut joinery. It will outlast every other piece of furniture in this room. I came here tonight to give Leo this cradle. That is the only reason I am standing here." The room went quiet in a different way. Then Marcus Webb stood up from the back. The man whose project I'd shut down in 2012. He walked straight to me. "Mr. Miller," he said, voice tight. "You stopped my warehouse conversion. I lost everything. I hated you for it. 3 years later, another building on the same block collapsed. Killed 2 people. Same structural flaw you caught in mine. You didn't destroy my project. You saved my family." He put out his hand. "I'm sorry it took me 11 years to say it." I shook it. The room stayed quiet for a long beat. Then conversation started again. Lower, careful. Richard appeared at my shoulder with a thick envelope. "A letter of appreciation," he said smoothly. "And a contribution. No strings." I pushed it back. "I don't take envelopes, Mr. Sterling. Never have." 20 minutes later, Julian pulled me into the window alcove. "What did you say to Richard?" His voice was shaking. "One phone call, Dad. That's all. Just to clarify the timeline. I'm drowning here." I looked at my son. "How long have you been telling people your father makes furniture?" He stared at the floor. 2 years. I told him the truth then. From the moment I sent that voicemail, I have not had a son named Julian. What I have is a situation involving a person I used to know, and I have been managing that situation as carefully as I know how. His face crumpled with grief. "I don't know how to fix this," he whispered. "No," I said, "not tonight." I picked up the moving blanket, found Thomas, laid my hand on the cradle one last time, and we walked out into the cold March night. 3 days later, Thomas called. The stop work order was official. The project was dead. More Sterling properties started unraveling. Cassandra called me weeks after that. She and Julian were separating. She was losing ground fast. In October, her lawyer came to see me. Cassandra wanted me to take temporary guardianship of Leo. She couldn't give him stability right now, but she trusted me to want nothing from him, except for him to be fine. The court approved it in 11 minutes. Leo came home on a Friday. Cassandra carried him to my door herself. She told me he sleeps better on his left side and doesn't like the vacuum cleaner. Then she placed him in my arms and drove away. That night I found an old letter in my father's roll-top desk. Julian had written it at 20, home for the summer, never sent. He wrote about wanting to be someone I could point to, someone who deserved to be pointed to. I folded it and placed it under the blanket in the white oak cradle, at the foot where the pine was warmest. I'm not forgiving him yet. Forgiveness is a direction, not a moment. But Leo deserves to know his father once wanted to be good. Leo is 7 months old now. He pulls himself up on the workbench leg and gives me the biggest smile I've ever seen. The workshop smells of pine and linseed oil and baby shampoo. The cradle doesn't creak. I built it to last. Some revenge stories end in fire. Mine ended with a child asleep in a cradle I made with my own hands. I spent decades being invisible to the people who should have seen me clearest. Don't do what I did. Don't swallow your worth to keep the peace. The people who truly love you shouldn't need a magazine cover to notice. God doesn't waste a quiet life. If this story stayed with you, tell me in the comments, what would you have done differently? Drop your city or country too. I read every one. And if you're raising the next generation after betrayal, you're not alone. I'll see you in the workshop.